crying boy. Continuing to delve into the history of our native land, I became increasingly attracted to stories about mysterious and paranormal phenomena. One day, a man appeared on the line with us and told a story about a crying child. We did not hesitate and are monitoring the scene of events of that very day. Our destination was Sour Lake, whose nature was sculpted in the shape of a perfect circle. A man shared with us a legend on this lake. According to a long-standing legend, children drowned heavily here in the past. As the parents shed tears of grief, the lake turned into sour. Sometimes people who were close to this phenomenon heard crying, but it was not a child's voice. Having written down this fascinating legend, we find evidence in search of evidence. Fate smiled on us, and we found a woman who, while still young, returned from work one night, witnessing these inexplicable phenomena. The time was approaching midnight. The woman walked past the lake, when suddenly she heard a child crying. Without hesitation, she followed the sound. Suddenly someone's child was lost somewhere. When she approached the lake, cry poetry. She walked around the entire shore, but did not find a single child. It was only when she returned home that her father told her the legend of the lake. She remembers this story 50 years later. Having recorded this unique testimony, historians entered the picture. The search for historical data was essential, as was personal observation of metric records. However, among them, there were only 4 cases of drowning of children. In all records, in the column the cause of death was drowning, the note Sour Lake was indicated. But one case, the last in 1862, attracted particular attention. In this case, a 5-year-old child drowned. He was an orphan under the care of distant relatives. In another column we learned that he was buried sometime after his death, since he could not be found for a long time. We are satisfied. I don't know why, but I was sure that it was this story that influenced generation after generation and still allows US to preserve its imprint on the lake and its favorable conditions. Perhaps people really hear the cry of a child 161 years later. It is scary and lonely. Or perhaps this is just a tragic story that has preserved popular rumor. Snapchat. Hi, so I'm a first-time poster on here. I have opt and tend to tell side stories and over-explain, so I am so sorry if this gets hard to read. I'll give some basic advice. My friend Amber 12F passed away a week before Christmas last year. It was very sudden and the farthest thing away from peaceful. The first experience I had was the night she passed away. I found out the next morning anyways. The dream was we were collecting rocks by the train tracks, and at the end she said, "I love you guys." I'm sorry. When she passed away, I always felt a presence and knew she was there. I visited her mom and sister's house. Her sister Liga 14F and me were staying up and talking about Amber, and a large leather jacket shot off its hook and onto the floor. But the thing I'm mainly typing about is a weird experience on Snapchat. My Snapchat got banned, and then I made a new account, and I added Amber's Snap. I don't know why I did. Maybe I wasn't ready to let her go. Then a month ago, the account added me back. I texted the account and said get off of Amber's account. Liga, the account left it on delivered for a week. Then it opened and never got back to me. I quickly texted Liga and asked her if she logged onto Amber's account, and she told me Amber never trusted her with any passwords, so she had no way to get in. I know she's telling the truth. We're so honest to each other. Last night at 4:13 am I woke up to my phone ringing. I didn't look at assuming it was my friend Jay, because we always fall asleep up. I started the hello and it was quiet, but there was a slight noise, almost like static from a TV mixed with a fan. I looked at it, and I immediately shot up and started saying, "Liga, stop it. It's not funny anymore. It's 4 AM and nothing." I put my ear up and tried to listen for a giggle or a ha-ha, "I got you." But it was nothing. I got so freaked out and hung up the phone. Liga was sleeping. Nothing else has happened. I'm so confused.
The man on the stairs. I grew up in a 60s-70s house about 45 minutes outside London. It was your usual creaky floorboard, barely carpeted sort of place. The first time we saw the man on the stairs, it was me. I was around 10 at the time, and I used to dry my hair on the landing. next to the banister which had slats so you could see through it. I had my hair flipped over my head and I saw who I thought was my dad, in his raincoat and carrying his briefcase, walking up the stairs. I flipped my hair back over to give him a hug like I usually did, but he wasn't there. I assumed he'd turned around and gone back downstairs, so I ran down and asked Mum where he'd gone, only she told me he wasn't home yet. I felt a bit creeped out, but it obviously went out of my head and it didn't really come up again. The next time I heard about him I was 18. I'd met my now husband maybe a year before and my parents had divorced by this point, so it tended to be my mum in the house with us there in the week. One Sunday morning I got a call from her asking if I was okay. I assured her I was and asked her what was wrong, and she said there had been banging on the front door at 3 in the morning. Our front door had 2 frosted glass panels top and bottom so you could make out shapes through it, and we had a street lamp opposite which lit it during the night. When she came to the top of the stairs to have a glance and see if she could see anything, she said she saw someone with a bag waiting. She started downstairs and stopped herself. She turned back to her bedroom and looked down towards the glass porch we had and couldn't see anyone. When she went back to the top of the stairs they had vanished. She thought we had had an argument and I'd come home since they were carrying a bag, but once she started playing it in her head she realized the person was taller than me, a bigger build, and was wearing a raincoat. The only other time I heard about him was from my brother. Now he's very scientific. He doesn't believe in ghosts or the paranormal at all, which is what amazed me even more. When he was younger and still living at home he used to stay up until all hours playing Xbox like you do, and one night he finished up, didn't bother turning on any lights, went to the bottom of the stairs and started walking up when he saw him, a man in a raincoat and a briefcase standing at the top of the stairs. He blinked a couple of times and stepped back down the 2 steps to click the light on, and when he looked back he was gone. The weird thing here is me and Mum never mentioned anything to him as he's very vocal about how daft he thinks it all is, but the description was perfect. We never found out who he was. As far as we could find out, no one died at the house. My mother passed in 2020 and we sold the house, so I always wonder if they're seeing him or if he moved on with her.
This is something that happened to me a handful of years ago and popped into mind and can't find anything about it. So a bunch of years ago, when I was around 15, I was having things start happening and didn't know what any of it was. The one thing that I want to say or ask, which has been on my mind to try and figure out, is this. It happened a couple of nights, not quite back to back, but I had this little creature jump up at the foot of my bed. I can't really describe it too well as it's years back now, but it had a higher pitched voice, not quite a kid, but not quite grown up. But the biggest thing that it would do is ask me questions throughout the night. The biggest one that it would ask me about was my name, which I did not say any of those times it asked, and would always tilt its head whenever it asked it. It would never really move out of that spot, and would always be around the same time. There were times that I was trying to fall asleep and ignore that it wasn't there, but then would keep asking more and more questions, like, "Do you hear me? Are you tired?" and trying to go to sleep. Again, I wouldn't answer it at all at this time. The last time I remember seeing it was when I started responding by saying, "Hi there, I don't want to talk tonight, maybe some other time." It didn't say anything and just felt it staying there. I don't remember anything else with it after that. I know I'm also new here, but I want to mainly see if anyone else has had the same thing or something similar, because I want to find out what it could have been. My wife says maybe a fairy or a fae, but I feel like it looked way different than what they would look like. My experience at an abandoned orphanage, verified by 4 others. The city that I went to college in had an abandoned Catholic orphanage. Just looking at the place, you could guess that it was haunted if you believe in that sort of thing. I was a skeptic before my experience, and I still sometimes question if my mind was playing tricks on me. But as you'll hear in my story, there were 5 of us present that all witnessed the same thing. Anyways, the backstory is that the nuns who ran this orphanage back in the day were very strict and cruel. I remember one particular story. A young child went outside to play in the winter, despite the nuns having told the children not to go out because it was too cold. This child then got pneumonia and died. The nuns allegedly displayed the child's body in the lobby of the orphanage as an example to the other children and to demonstrate that the child would still be alive had he, she, I can't remember the gender, listened. The story is that this child haunts the building as a benevolent spirit and often appears as a blue-green orb, generally in the basement area. 4 of my friends and I decided to explore the orphanage one night. It was a bit difficult to get into, but we eventually managed. We had to enter onto the 2nd floor just with how all the doors and windows were boarded up. Initially, nothing really happened, but it was a neat place to see. Then, we went down onto the 1st floor. As we were walking down the hallway, I looked to my left, down a stairwell. That's when I saw a bluish-green orb floating there. After a moment, it quickly darted down the stairwell. I immediately asked my friends if any of them had seen that, and when they said that they didn't, I told them that I thought it was time to leave. None of them wanted to, so we continued down the hallway. As we approached the end of the hallway, there was a large room right at the end that looked like it may have been a classroom or something. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like children whispering coming from the classroom. I could tell that everyone else was startled too, and one of my friends said, "All right, it's time to go." After we got out of the building, we all recounted what had just happened. All 5 of us had heard these whispers. If it was just me, I'd think my mind was playing tricks on me, but 5 of us heard it. That was pretty much it. Apparently, the orphanage is now an apartment complex. Monsters among us. Long story ahead. This is a story according to my mother's experience when she was a teenager living in a remote village in one of the islands in the Philippines. This happened in the 70s. My mother told me when she first got into high school, she had a seatmate who shares the same name as her. Other than their names, my mother recalled they also share the same interest with music and arts. They instantly clicked and became friends. One day, my mother's friends skipped school without notifying their teachers. It was a small village and most people already knew where each family lives. My mother, being a good friend, thought to visit her friend's house after school to check up on her. Before she got to her friend's house, which is located along the riverbank, several of her classmates stopped her on the way, telling her to never go to that house. My mother said, "Engano mamwedo," and her classmates said, "K sila make on octawo," because they eat people. Now, this is not new to my mother. She knew about these rumors at the village, but she never believed these type of accusations. She even shared lunches with her friend. The food they shared didn't taste weird. Her friend acts like every other normal person, so she treats her like anybody else. My mother went ahead, despite the warnings of her classmates. Now, keep in mind that it all happened around 4 or 5 in the afternoon. The sun was still up, and it was still bright in the riverbank. My mother wasn't scared at all until from afar, she saw a woman crouching at the riverbed, shallow part of the river. She initially thought this woman was washing clothes or maybe peeing at the river. This woman had a long frizzy white hair and appears to be wearing a long black dress with its hem already wet by the river water. My mother kept walking, but when she came closer to the woman, she heard this woman was talking to herself. The woman was covering her face with her palms, whispering, "I hope the sun sets soon. I hope the sun sets soon," over and over. This scared the shit out of my mother. She began sprinting to my grandparents' home. Back home, she thought the woman she saw could have been a person with mental illness, so she tried to forget about it and just slept. My mother lives in a nipa hut. Their source of light was only a candle lamp, and they did not have a mattress. They sleep on the bamboo floors with several cracks on it. At 12 midnight, as my mother thought, she felt movements under the floorboards. She was laying with her back on the floor, but she could feel someone is crawling underneath. That's when on her peripheral, she saw long bony fingers slowly emerging between the floorboards. The fingers were poking in and out the floorboards as if it was looking for something to feel. It went away for a bit and my mother thought it was gone, until my mother felt the fingers now poking on her back. Then it felt like the fingers were digging into her skin, pinching her. It was so painful she could not breathe. She couldn't even make a sound because she was so scared. All she can do is endure the pain and cry silently. That's when the house cat, the hero on this story, bolted outside, knocking down their candle lamp, waking my grandparents. My grandfather, a hunter, took a bolo machete and chased the house cat outside as it appears to be fighting something. That's when my grandfather saw this big black bird trying to get away from the claws of the cat, as it turned into a freaking wild boar before fleeing. My grandfather, even in shock, shouted, "Don't ever come back here, or I will hunt you all." My grandfather guarded the whole house, making rounds all throughout the night until sunrise. My mother never saw her friend since then.